Zack Polanski and Zai Yusuf faced off again on Question Time for an immigration special. Once again, these two were the focus of the show. Since this was an immigration special, the main person to defend immigration was Polanski, as Labour, the Tories and Reform have taken the same line, that migration is a problem. Zack didn't mince his words.
And this is personal to me, and I know it'll be personal to many people watching this programme. My great-grandparents lived in Latvia. They're Jewish, and we fled because of pogroms. We ended up in Ukraine. We fled again, more pogroms. Then in Nazi-occupied Poland, then fled again. And this is what people have done throughout history. They have fled because they've moved because of war or persecution, or they've moved because of people they love or that they want to travel.
And do you think there should be any limits on those numbers? Judging from your manifesto, you don't.
Well, I think we need to be really clear about the numbers. This year, 800,000 people have arrived in this country. 400,000 of them have come to study. 300,000 of them have come to work and are a net contribution to our tax system.
Yes, but that's answering a different question.
Well,
the question I'm asking you, Zack, is do you believe, because judging from what the Greens say, though quite often you shy away from it for saying it in public, but what is written down is that you believe in a world without borders, therefore anyone who wants to come should be able to come. Is that correct?
So what's important to know is that when we talk about those numbers, we're talking about a policy for a sustainable society.
You haven't actually answered that.
I'm answering you right now. This is about what it looks like in the future. Yes, in an ideal world, that is the policy I would want. I recognise, though, we are not in an ideal world. We're in a world where the world is in turmoil. We know that we have huge issues in our country. But the issues with the National Health Service, the issues with the lack of council homes, the issues with the society feeling broken are not the issues of migrants or someone who is clinging to a small boat. They are the issues of 14 years of Conservative austerity, continued by a Labour government who say this is an island of strangers, but actually, you're a government of cowards because you won't tell people the truth about migration. And the truth about migration, it is a positive thing for this country. We need migration. We need fair and managed migration. And that's what will change this conversation.
Woman there.
Ooh, government of cowards. Certainly didn't mince his words. Now, much of the attacks against the Greens have been on so-called open borders. Reform attacks them on this, but this is in reference to a motion in which they want to see a world without borders, but not an open border policy in today's context. However, the rest of the panel accuse Zack of not knowing his own policy.
I want to talk about fair and managed migration. And the reason why I want to do that...
because open borders is part of your policy.
Hold on, it's not in our manifesto.
Have you read it? Zack, it is not as we speak.
Have you read your manifesto?
Have you noticed how rattled they all are about the Green Party? Because actually what I'm talking about is something very pragmatic.
I don't think so.
We have an
Have you read
ageing...
your manifesto?
Am I going to be allowed to talk?
Just ask us a question.
We have an ageing population.
Well, he hasn't.
We've had a declining birth rate, the lowest birth rate for the last 3 years. And ultimately, we have pensions to pay. So we've got people coming over here who, on average, as a migrant worker, are contributing £78,000 over the time, then going back to their home country and not taking out of our system. So they are a net benefit. Most people in this audience and watching this at home will have had an experience of a care worker. 1 in 5 care workers are foreign nationals. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't particularly want to wipe someone's bum. And I'm very grateful for the people who do this work, this really important work, whether it's in the care sector, whether it's in the NHS. Now, I met with the leadership of the BMA recently, the British Medical Association. It's not true that 50% of doctors can't get jobs. That's after 1 month. Now, that's okay, not okay. We need to work on it. But it's not the problem of migrants. We need to listen to people. And next week, I'm going to be going to Calais because I actually want to listen to the people who are having these experiences, both in terms of the boats that we're talking about, and not to go back to it too much. But the reason why people don't stop in France is a safe country, but the UK is also a safe country. And we can't expect every single migrant to stay in France. And largely, they have people from the Congo and from the Ivory Coast because of colonization. And so if people speak English, that's why they want to come to the UK.
But Zack, why should we take anyone that doesn't make a...
Ken, I'm just shutting you down.
Why should we take any...
Now, it's good to see Zack calling them rattled on here. They absolutely are. And I'm glad he explains that when asylum seekers come to the UK, the main reasons are family and those that speak English, right? Wouldn't we all do the same if we were in the same scenario? Now, the right-wing media will tell you that it's our so-called generous welfare system. And you'll see on our next story, that is not categorically true. Now, I did see some people online criticizing his wiping bum comment. I mean, I get it. It sounds like you're reducing migrants to doing shitty jobs, but it is true that a lot of Brits won't do it. Plus, he's taken on an entire political establishment. I wouldn't be too harsh on him, especially if it's effective rhetoric. Now, I thought what Fiona Bruce said in this next clip is very revealing.
Margaret Thatcher said there's no such thing as society, and then the Tories over 14 years shut the community centres down. How do you expect people to integrate if they've got nowhere to gather together, to pray together, to eat together, even to disagree together? English language learning for foreign nationals has been cut by 25% over the last 10 years. The last thing I want to say, as soon as I got off the train today in Dover, a woman recognised me and she said to me, we are not obsessed with immigration in Dover. Actually, the things we care about are our NHS, our libraries and our schools. We've had an This is an immigration special, but when are we going to have a cost of living special, or a climate special, or a tax for rich special?
Well, all I would say is, on question time, I think it's probably true that we talk about cost of living every week. Yeah. So I'm not sure we need a special programme for it, because we do it every...
Fiona Bruce saying, well, you know, we talk about cost of living every single show. You talk about immigration every single show. I mean, I think Zack tried to mention that point in there as well. The idea, and this just goes to show how the political establishment does not give a fuck about working class people, doesn't care, or is actually, not even that they don't care, they don't realise their own privilege. They're so out of touch that immigration for these people was such an insanely big topic. And granted, it's one or two, typically number two on people's agenda on what they care about. Yes, immigration is very salient, but the idea there could be a cost of living crisis special befuddles people like Fiona Bruce, befuddles people in the corporate and establishment media, because they think, well, it's not important. Material conditions has and always will be the number one priority for people, right? Even those that absolutely hate immigrants. Do they wake up in the morning thinking, damn, immigrants? I mean, maybe some do. But they think, can I pay my bill today? Can I pay my rent? Even those who have joined in the far right and turned into fascist, right? They still need to eat. They still need to pay bills, a roof over their head. So, you know, material conditions is always number one. And the way that Fiona Bruce says, well, we talk about cost of living every single time. Yes, you talk about immigration every single show, but cost of living is the number one issue. There should be a special. Absolutely. And if you ask me, every single Question Time episode should have a business leader or CEO and a trade unionist every single time. Because then you can at least have a robust debate. Of course, those of us on the left will always side with the unions and the workers, right? But that will be a proper discussion because you're talking about people's material conditions. You're talking about inequality, and that will be embedded into Question Time because every single episode you'd have someone from the business community and someone from the trade union community. That's what I would say. Now, we have a clip of Zack Yousaf attacking Labour.
Look what the Labour government has done. Over 70,000 people have arrived in the United Kingdom illegally since Labour came to power, 50,000 in the last 12 months. That is up 40% year on year relative to the Tory record, which was already a disaster. And notice the very smart sleight of hand that the immigration minister from Labour uses when he talks about 50,000 deportations and removals. Shall we talk about those 50,000, Mike?
Go for it.
A very tiny fraction of those are actual deportations, i.e. enforced
removals.
Why
I said removals.
That's
why I said
so
removals.
Will you accept then that over half of those 50,000 are what's known by the Home Office as other verified returns, which means the government literally didn't even know they were leaving until after they had left. Okay, do you know what percentage? Okay, Mike, genuine question. Mike, genuine question.
Go.
What percentage of the people who have come here illegally under Labour have been deported?
Look, what's really important...
No, please answer my question.
What's really important
what
is
percentage of those 70,000 have been deported?
50,000 have been deported since we came to power.
What percentage of the 70,000 who have come here illegally?
You can do the maths of 70,000
that Mike is pretending to not know or actually doesn't know. The answer is 27. The answer is 2,700 people. Just 4% of the people who have arrived here illegally under Keir Starmer's awful government have been deported. That means 96% are still here, so it's no coincidence that these people people are streaming across the channel on a daily basis. Britain is a soft touch, and what Labour has done is poured gasoline on a fire that the Tories created. It is totally unfair on British people, and by the way, I include legal migrants within that equation. It is totally unfair. People are furious about it, and for you to sit here and gaslight people with fake numbers, which the Home Office does, Shabana Mahmood does, time and again, I think is totally unacceptable and insulting to British people's intelligence.
Do you want to answer that briefly before I come to you?
I will be brief on this. Look, we're not a soft touch, and you've seen from the sweeping reforms to the system over the last few weeks is the largest since the Second World War. When it comes to the number of deportations and removal, what Zia is doing there is he's splitting hairs.
On one hand, we have Zack Polanski speaking to the audience, making impassioned speeches, whilst Zaya is having back and forth squabbles with Mike Tapp. Now, Zaya Youssef also got a frosty reception after appearing to be rude to an audience member.
In front in the blue sweater.
Mike, you said that the waiting list in the services are due to migration. That is a fallacy. Mr. Youssef, you talked that there are enough people in the United Kingdom to not need foreign doctors. I joined the NHS as a student in 1974. We've been totally reliant on doctors from Asia initially, and the care sector is totally dependent on care workers from abroad, despite 9 million people not being in work. One reason why people wait for GPs is certainly because the population has gone up, but equally because there's funding for general practice compared to funding for hospital sectors has gone down. So you're conflating lots of different things to state your argument. But my question to you is, you have said, I believe, that migrant workers will lose their indefinite right to live here.
Indefinite leave to remain.
So sorry, I got the wording wrong. So if you've worked as a care worker in a nursing home for 40 years, you're already, since last year, not allowed to bring your children over. So when you get to 65, you're going to be sent back to where you came from. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, it's not at all. And if you had paid attention to what we were announcing, you would not have that view. My mother is a care home worker. My mother is a care home worker.
Typically rude.
My mother is a care home worker.
Be polite to people at the same time. They're not decent.
Has worked in care homes for years.
I guess Zia didn't have the best performance, which is possibly the reason why he has turned his attention to a conspiracy. Zia tweeted this. So on Question Time tonight, the BBC asked a question of an Iranian illegal migrant in the audience. His question was him reading from his phone a list of reasons why Britain should not withdraw from the ECHR. He even mentioned the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, many right-wing accounts on Twitter also shared it, claiming this was a psyop. Even Reform Deputy Leader Richard Tice pointed to an apparent earpiece as proof. Did the BBC Question Time give headset and coaching to this channel illegal migrants? He then has cheat to tell us British taxpayers that we must not leave ECHR, could not make it up. I mean, it's most likely a hearing aid, but this is the level of slop a Reform MP is posting. No different to the anonymous bot accounts. It even led to Mike Tapp coming to the man's defence. To clarify, a few people asking questions last night on Question Time were reading from phones or paper. It's a daunting task, but when a migrant does it, it's a Reform-created conspiracy theory. Get a grip. Mike Tapp took a break from joining in on the migrant bashing and actually made a good point. Now, look, I don't watch Question Time. It's a decision to protect my mental health. And not gonna lie, it's just pure slop. But Kevin, right? Let's bring you in. You did. What are your thoughts?
I thought Zack Polanski did very well in the limited time he was given. As always, the pretended left-wing bias of the BBC is, in fact, a right-wing bias. Zia Youssef was given far more time to speak. The Tory and the Labour Party guy, who was basically a Tory, was given far more time to speak than either Zack Polanski of the Green Party or indeed Daisy Cooper of the Lib Dems, who, even though she's a Lib Dem, did all right, actually. Yeah, Zack Polanski, I think knocked it out of the park. I think he did very well and will appeal to a lot of people he's trying to appeal to. I think you'll see another bump in membership for the Green Party, definitely. And I think some of the criticism from leftists has been pretty badly misplaced. I understand that his somewhat problematic use of language towards the idea that migrants are to be sort of exploited for our use, but that's not how that works. It's basically people have to do some work. Production has to take place on some level. So if people are to come into the country, they have to do jobs, right? They have to exist in an economy, regardless of how one structures that economy. And secondly, on a practical basis, if we're to shift the Overton window, you need to make people who are afraid of things like migration less afraid of them. And you can't appeal to some people on the basis of their humanity because they don't possess humanity. They don't possess compassion. So appeal to them on self-interest basis. Appeal to them that, as was quite rightly pointed out by Zack Polanski, people don't want to wipe arses for a living. No one chooses really to want to wipe an arse for a living. People might want to go into care, that's true, but wiping someone's arse is a very unpleasant task, both for the person being wiped and the wiper. I guarantee you the people criticising Zack Polanski for saying that, if you put them all in a room and said, who wants to actually wipe an arse right now, I'm guessing you wouldn't have many hands in the air. It's an unpleasant task and very badly remunerated, unfortunately, as well. And so Zack Polanski making these points is just good politics. That's just the way you have to look at this. If you were to have a more sane debate about immigration, you need to move people across. You need to move the Overton window toward the left. And I think he's definitely doing the right thing in terms of trying to make that happen. In terms of Zia Youssef, I think his approach to this, as always, is wrong. I don't know why the Reform Party insist on putting him forward. Well, I do. It's because he's a brown man, and therefore he can sell the racism more effectively. That's basically it. In the same way that the Tories worked out that if you put a brown person doing the racism in the Home Office, it seems less racist. And indeed, the Labour Party are now doing that with Shabana Mahmood as Home Secretary. It's a very, very cynical political ploy. But he's not actually a very effective communicator. And his contempt for the working class and contempt, generally speaking, for the British people and the electorate comes through in spades. And the clip you showed of him just rankly insulting a person is just typical of that. He is one of the reasons that the numbers for the Reform Party have plateaued, because people can't get past the fact that they're very obviously a hateful, nasty, spiteful group of people. And Zia Youssef is exactly a progenitor of that. The fact that this is the second time that he and Zack Polanski have appeared on Question Time together is also, I think, indicative of another problem. Firstly, that Reform are given vastly disproportionate airtime, and that people who aren't even elected officials get disproportionate airtime. I'm okay with that with Zack Polanski because he's the leader of a political party, but Zia Youssef is nobody. Zia Youssef is a Tory who became a member of Reform and has been given pointless positions, basically, including the Doge nonsense, and then resigned and then immediately unresigned 2 days later. And he's given a platform constantly on this programme. Why? He's never been elected to anything. He's never run anything. He's an absolutely pointless Nepo baby prick. Why is he even on that show? And yeah, the show is slop. Absolutely, undoubtedly. The fact that we, as Zack Polanski so perfectly pointed out, the fact that we have an immigration special, even though they talk about immigration every week, and you don't have a cost of living special, you don't have a tax the rich special, you don't have a Gaza special necessarily. Although I think did they have a kind of Gaza special at one point? I'm not sure. But either way, you end up with a ridiculously skewed view of things, because if you look at the age cohorts, those 45 and over are disproportionately vastly more interested in migration than those 45 and below. But of course, as so often the case in British politics, you end up with the entire political establishment pandering to the group of people who are 50 and over.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And sometimes when they do like the youth question time, it's not very often, they shouldn't talk about immigration then, since only people who are older care about it. To pick up on the point about Zack Polanski's wiping bums comment, I noticed it was a lot of right-wingers who attacked him for it, and it's hilarious because it's faux outrage, it's concern trolling, because they're like, oh, how dare he say that? Your entire political project is about attacking immigrants, and you're attacking Zack Polanski on this. Of course, it's political point scoring, but again, just I do think cut the man some slack given what's going on.